Ambassador Julian Nash stared at his reflection in the polished surface of the Kylaxian embassy's crystalline walls. The iridescent diplomatic robes they'd given him shifted colors with each movement, a stark contrast to his dark skin and closely cropped black hair. 6 years of diplomatic service hadn't prepared him for the complexities of Kylaxian culture, but here he was, Earth's newest representative to their enigmatic civilization. The summons to the Spiral Palace had arrived that morning, carried by one of Queen Lysandra's silver-scaled attendants. The invitation was unexpected, the Kylaxians rarely welcomed outsiders to their inner sanctum. Julian adjusted the ceremonial brooch on his collar, a gift from the Galactic Council marking Earth's recent admission into the interstellar community. Ambassador Nash, a melodious voice echoed through the chamber. A Kylaxian noble glided into view, her crystalline skin refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. I am First Sentinel Naira. The Queen awaits. Julian followed Naira through corridors that seemed to be grown rather than built, organic crystal formations pulsing with bioluminescent light. The architecture reflected the Kylaxians themselves, beautiful, alien, and impossibly complex. The throne room took his breath away. Massive crystal columns spiraled toward a ceiling that opened to the purple sky, where 3 moons hung like pearls on dark silk. Queen Lysandra sat upon a throne that appeared to be made of living crystal, her form more magnificent and terrible than any holovid could capture. Her skin was pure crystal, faceted and clear as diamond, while her eyes held swirling galaxies of silver. Ambassador Nash, the Queen's voice resonated through the chamber, welcome to the heart of the Kylaxian Empire. Julian bowed deeply, following the precise angle his cultural advisors had drilled into him. Your Majesty honors me with this invitation. Rise, Ambassador. You've been invited to participate in the ceremony of harmonic convergence. The Queen's expression was unreadable, her crystalline features catching light in ways that made it impossible to read micro-expressions. It is a rare honor for an outsider. Warning bells rang in Julian's mind. His briefing materials had mentioned nothing about this ceremony. I'm deeply honored, Your Majesty, though I confess I'm not familiar with this particular tradition. A sound like wind chimes filled the air, Kylaxian laughter, he realized, as several courtiers responded to his statement. The Queen's expression shifted, fragments of light dancing across her features. The ceremony celebrates the alignment of our 3 moons, marking a time of transformation. Before Julian could respond, the throne room's crystals began to pulse with rhythmic light. Kylaxian nobles moved into formation around him, their crystalline bodies creating complex patterns of refracted light. The effect was hypnotic, and Julian found himself swaying slightly to their unheard melody. The ceremony requires your participation in the dance of resonance, Naira explained, taking position beside him. Simply follow the flow of light and sound. What followed was unlike anything in Julian's diplomatic experience. The Kylaxians moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies creating ever-changing patterns of light and shadow. Julian did his best to follow along, though his human form felt clumsy and organic compared to their crystalline grace. As the dance reached its crescendo, Julian noticed something odd. The light patterns were concentrating around him, creating a cocoon of luminescence. The Queen had risen from her throne, her form towering and radiant. With this dance, she announced, her voice ringing with authority, we mark the choosing of our newest resident. The warning bells in Julian's mind became sirens. Your Majesty, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Ambassador Nash. You have demonstrated remarkable harmonic compatibility. Your presence here is no accident. Julian's diplomatic training kicked in as he maintained his composure. Perhaps we should discuss the implications of this honor in more detail. The choice has been made, Queen Lysandra declared. The ceremony has begun. You will remain in the Spiral Palace to begin your transformation. Transformation. Julian's voice remained steady, though his heart raced. I don't believe Earth's diplomatic protocols cover physical transformation of its representatives. The queen's crystalline features shifted into what might have been amusement. Your species' adaptability is precisely why you were chosen, Ambassador. The Kylaxian Empire requires new resonances to maintain its harmony. You will help us achieve that. Guards materialized from the crystal walls themselves, their forms barely distinguishable from the architecture. Julian realized with growing alarm that what had seemed like a diplomatic opportunity was actually an elaborate trap. Your Majesty, he said carefully, while I'm honored by your interest, any transformation of an Earth diplomat would constitute a serious breach of interstellar law. Laws change, Ambassador Nash. As will you. The Queen gestured, and the crystal floor beneath Julian began to glow. The harmonic convergence has chosen. Resistance would be dissonant. As the crystal light began to envelope him, Julian's mind raced through options. The Kylaxians had clearly planned this carefully, but they had overlooked one crucial detail: humans had a remarkable talent for disrupting even the most carefully orchestrated plans. The transformation had begun, but this was far from over. Julian Nash might have walked into their trap, but he was determined to show them why humanity had earned its place among the stars. The crystalline chamber they'd confined Julian to was both beautiful and unsettling. Prismatic walls shifted and flowed like liquid glass, creating an ever-changing landscape of light and color. His diplomatic robes had been replaced with a shimmering garment that seemed to pulse in harmony with the chamber's rhythms. 3 days had passed since the ceremony, and he could already feel subtle changes beginning. His skin occasionally caught the light in strange ways, refracting rather than reflecting it. The transformation was beginning, just as Queen Lysandra had promised. But Julian Nash hadn't spent years in diplomatic service without learning how to turn seemingly impossible situations to his advantage. First Sentinel Naira visited him daily, ostensibly to monitor his transformation. Unlike the other Kylaxians, she seemed genuinely curious about him as more than just a specimen. Today, she studied him with her kaleidoscope eyes as they spoke. The resonance patterns are remarkable, she observed. Your cellular structure is adapting far more quickly than our models predicted. Julian flexed his fingers, watching light dance across his skin. Tell me, Sentinel Naira, why did your people really choose a human for this process? Surely there are more compatible species in the galaxy. Naira's crystalline form shifted, a sign Julian had learned indicated deep thought. Humanity's adaptability is legendary. Your species thrives in conditions that would break others. But there's more. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Our empire is stagnating, Ambassador Nash. We've become like our crystals, beautiful, but rigid. Unchanging. And you think transforming a human will somehow help? Julian asked, carefully noting this revelation. The Queen believes your transformation will introduce new harmonics into our collective resonance. But some of us. She hesitated, some of us hope for more fundamental changes. Before she could elaborate, the chamber's entrance dissolved, revealing Queen Lysandra herself. Naira immediately straightened, her form becoming more rigid and formal. Leave us, the Queen commanded, and Naira quickly departed. Lysandra's towering form dominated the chamber, her crystalline body refracting light in complex patterns that made Julian's eyes hurt. Your transformation progresses well, she observed. Soon you will join our collective harmony. Julian met her gaze steadily. And if I refuse to participate in this harmony? Refuse? The Queen's laugh was like breaking glass. The process cannot be reversed, Ambassador. The changes are fundamental. Perhaps, Julian agreed, but transformation doesn't equal compliance, Your Majesty. Humans have a long history of accepting physical changes while maintaining their essential nature. The Queen's form shifted, fractals of light cascading across her surface. You speak boldly for one in your position. Do you not realize the honor being bestowed upon you? Honor? Julian stood, noting how the chamber's light seemed to bend around him now. You abducted a diplomatic representative and are forcibly altering his biological structure. The Galactic Council will view this as an act of war. The Council, Lysandra dismissed, understands the importance of our empire's stability. Your transformation will be presented as a voluntary diplomatic exchange. Julian smiled, a sharp expression that felt foreign on his increasingly crystalline features. You understand so little about humans, Your Majesty. We don't simply accept what we're told. We question. We resist. We change things. Your resistance is irrelevant, the Queen declared. The resonance will. Will what? Julian interrupted, surprising them both. Force me to comply. Make me a perfect crystalline puppet. You chose a human for our adaptability, but you forgot something crucial about us. The Queen's form stilled, waiting. Humans don't just adapt to survive, Julian continued. We adapt to thrive. To change things. You wanted new harmonics in your empire? Well, you're about to get them, just not in the way you planned. The chamber's lights flickered as Lysandra's anger manifested in waves of discordant energy. You forget your place, Ambassador. No, Your Majesty. I'm discovering it. Julian felt the crystalline changes in his body responding to his emotions, creating patterns of light that clashed with the chamber's harmony. You wanted to transform me into something new. Congratulations, you're succeeding. But you never stopped to consider that I might transform you in return. The Queen's form crackled with energy. Guards. The chamber walls rippled as crystalline figures emerged. Before you do anything rash, Julian advised calmly, you might want to check the resonance patterns I've been creating. Naira's not the only one who sees the stagnation in your empire. How many of your people are watching this interaction right now, through these crystal walls? How many are questioning your absolute authority for the first time? Lysandra went utterly still, and Julian knew he'd struck a nerve. The transformation had given him insight into how the Kylaxian's crystalline network functioned. Every interaction was potentially visible to all, if they knew how to look. You're causing dangerous disharmony, the Queen warned. I'm causing necessary change, Julian corrected. Isn't that exactly what you wanted? Just not quite so, personal. As guards surrounded him, Julian maintained his composure. The transformation was changing him, yes, but not in the way the Queen had intended. Instead of breaking his will, it was giving him new ways to fight back. The trial of the Crystal Court was just beginning, and Julian Nash intended to show them exactly why humanity had earned its reputation among the stars. The deepest levels of the Spiral Palace held secrets that even Queen Lysandra didn't know existed. Julian discovered this when Naira led him through crystalline passages that seemed to absorb light rather than refract it. His partially transformed body resonated with the strange harmonics of this place, creating ripples of darkness in his wake. The ancient chambers, Naira explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Built before the time of crystallization, when our people were different. She gestured to markings on the walls that seemed to shift and change, telling stories of a more organic past. Julian studied the patterns with his newly enhanced senses. Your people weren't always crystalline. The transformation was a choice made by our ancestors, Naira confirmed. They believed crystalline form would bring perfection, harmony, immortality. And it did, but at a cost we're only now beginning to understand. They weren't alone in these forbidden chambers. Other Kylaxians emerged from the shadows, nobles, scholars, even some of the Queen's own guard. All of them showed signs of subtle difference from the perfect crystalline forms above. Their surfaces were less rigid, their movements more fluid. We call ourselves the Fluid Faction, a male Kylaxian stepped forward, his form rippling like water captured in crystal. I am Sentinel Theron, once the Queen's most trusted advisor, now branded a dissident for questioning the path of perfect crystallization. Julian observed the gathered rebels, noting how their forms seemed to flow and change. You're reversing the crystallization process. Not reversing, Theron corrected. Evolving. Finding a balance between stability and change. Your transformation has shown us new possibilities. The chamber hummed with energy as more Kylaxians joined them. Julian realized his own partially transformed state was creating harmonics that resonated with their evolved forms. The queen knows nothing of this. She suspects descent but cannot comprehend its nature, Naira explained. Lysandra has become like the perfect crystals she worships, beautiful, powerful, but ultimately brittle. Unable to adapt. Julian thought of his confrontation with the queen, understanding now why his resistance had disturbed her so deeply. She fears change because she can no longer change herself. Precisely, Theron agreed. For centuries, we've maintained the illusion of perfect crystalline harmony. But beneath the surface, many of us have been experimenting, evolving, seeking a new way forward. A younger Kylaxian stepped forward, her form flowing like liquid mercury. Show him what we've discovered in the ancient records, she urged Theron. The sentinel touched the chamber wall, and the patterns shifted to reveal historical images. Julian watched in fascination as the story of the Kylaxian transformation unfolded. Their ancestors had been beings of fluid grace, choosing crystallization as a response to some ancient crisis. The process was never meant to be permanent, Naira explained. Our ancestors intended it as a temporary adaptation, a way to survive. But those who achieved the perfect crystalline form became obsessed with its preservation. And now you want to change back? Julian asked. Not back, Theron corrected. Forward. We believe the next evolution of our species lies in finding balance between fluid and crystal, chaos and harmony. Your unique transformation is proving this is possible. Julian studied his own changing form with new understanding. The alterations he'd been fighting weren't turning him into a perfect crystal being, they were creating something entirely new. Why show me this? Because you've already begun catalyzing change throughout the Empire, Naira said. Your human adaptability, combined with our crystalline resonance, is creating harmonics that awaken long-dormant possibilities in our people. A distant alarm sounded, its discordant notes rippling through the crystal walls. Theron's form tensed. The queen has discovered your absence. She'll send guards to search the lower levels, another rebel warned. Julian felt the vibrations through his transformed flesh, understanding the patterns in a way his human self never could. She's not just sending guards, he realized. She's coming herself. The chamber erupted in motion as the rebels prepared for confrontation. But Julian held up a hand, an idea forming. Wait. This might be exactly what we need. To be discovered. To be shattered. Theron demanded. To force change, Julian corrected. You've shown me your truth. Now it's time to show her. He turned to Naira. You said the ancient chambers hold records of your original transformation. Yes, but. Then let's use them. The queen wants harmony. Let's show her what true harmony looks like, not rigid control, but a dynamic balance between order and chaos. The rebels exchanged glances, their forms shifting with uncertainty. Finally, Theron spoke. What do you propose, Ambassador? Julian smiled, feeling the crystalline patterns in his flesh respond to his determination. Your people chose crystallization to survive a crisis. Maybe it's time to remind your queen that survival sometimes requires evolution. The chamber's harmonics changed as the rebels considered his words. Above them, they could feel Queen Lysandra's approach, her powerful resonance sending shivers through the ancient crystal walls. She'll try to shatter us, Naira warned. Let her try, Julian replied, his partially crystalline form catching the light in ways that made the ancient patterns dance. It's time to show her that true strength isn't about being unbreakable, it's about knowing how to change. The rebels moved into position as the queen's resonance grew stronger. Julian stood at their center, his unique form bridging the gap between human adaptability and Kylaxian power. The ancient chamber seemed to pulse with anticipation, its patterns shifting faster as the moment of confrontation approached. The time for hiding was over. Deep beneath the spiral palace, surrounded by living proof that change was not only possible but necessary, Julian prepared to show Queen Lysandra exactly what happened when immovable crystal met unstoppable evolution. Queen Lysandra's arrival shook the ancient chambers to their foundations. She descended like an avalanche of light, her crystalline form radiating power that made the very walls sing with resonant energy. Behind her, a phalanx of guards moved in perfect geometric formation, their faceted bodies reflecting her brilliance. Traitors, her voice rang through the chamber, each syllable a sharp note of crystal against crystal. You dare corrupt our perfect harmony with these aberrations? Julian stepped forward, his partially transformed body creating interference patterns in the Queen's light show. Perfect harmony? Or perfect stagnation? The Queen's form seemed to grow larger, filling the chamber with fractals of light. Ambassador Nash. I should have known you would be at the center of this dissonance. Look around you, Your Majesty, Julian gestured to the ancient markings on the walls. Your ancestors didn't choose crystallization to achieve perfection. They chose it to survive. You know nothing of our history, Lysandra spat, but Julian noticed how her light flickered when she looked at the historical records. Theron moved to Julian's side, his fluid crystal form rippling. We know everything, my queen. The ancient records speak truth. The crystallization was meant to be temporary, a metamorphosis, not an end state. Lies, the Queen's voice shattered against the walls. Our perfect form is the pinnacle of evolution. Then why can't it adapt? Naira challenged, stepping forward. Other members of the fluid faction emerged from the shadows, their bodies demonstrating the very change Lysandra denied was possible. Why do we need to transform others to maintain our empire's resonance? The Queen's guards shifted uneasily, their own forms beginning to respond to the discordant harmonies filling the chamber. Julian felt the vibrations through his transformed flesh, doubt spreading like cracks through perfect crystal. You think change makes you stronger? Lysandra demanded. Change brings chaos. Disorder. The end of everything we've built. Julian laughed, the sound creating ripples in the chamber's energy field. Change is the only constant in the universe, Your Majesty. Humans learned that lesson long ago. We don't fear change, we embrace it. We shape it. We grow through it. He moved closer to the Queen, his hybrid form both beautiful and impossible by Kylaxian standards. You didn't choose me for this transformation because humans are adaptable. You chose me because deep down, you know your empire needs to change. Be silent. Lysandra's form blazed with power. Guards, shatter these imperfect forms. But the guards didn't move. Many of them were staring at the ancient records, their crystalline bodies beginning to shift and flow as long-dormant possibilities awakened within them. Your Majesty, Julian's voice was gentle now. You don't have to fear this. Look at your people. They're not breaking, they're evolving. Becoming something new. Something stronger. The chamber hummed with energy as more Kylaxians began to change, their perfect crystalline forms softening, flowing, adapting. The Queen watched in horror and fascination as the transformation spread through her guards like ripples in a pond. What have you done? She whispered. I showed them the truth, Julian replied. The same truth your ancestors knew, that true strength lies not in resisting change, but in learning to flow with it. Theron approached the Queen, his form now a mesmerizing blend of fluid grace and crystalline power. My Queen, join us. Remember what we once were. Imagine what we could become. Lysandra's light dimmed as she studied her transformed subjects. For the first time, uncertainty crept into her perfect crystalline form. The Empire, our traditions, can evolve, Naira finished. Just as we have. Just as we must. Julian felt a shift in the chamber's harmonics as the Queen's rigid resistance began to waver. The ancient patterns on the walls seemed to pulse in response, telling their story of transformation and survival. Your ancestors didn't choose crystallization because it was perfect, he said softly. They chose it because they were brave enough to change when change was needed. Are you as brave as they were? The queen's form shimmered, decades of certainty battling against the evidence before her. The perfect crystal began to shift, almost imperceptibly at first, then with growing confidence as ancient memories awakened in her transformed flesh. The records speak of a time of great crisis, she admitted, her voice changing as her form began to flow. Our people faced extinction. The crystallization saved us, but... She touched the ancient markings with a hand that was no longer purely crystal, it was never meant to be our final form. The chamber resonated with new harmonies as the queen's transformation began in earnest. Julian watched in awe as the most powerful being in the empire chose to embrace change, her perfect crystalline form flowing into something new, something that bridged the gap between past and future. The empire will resist, she warned, but her voice held more wonder than fear now. Then we'll help them adapt, Julian promised. That's what humans do best, we help others navigate change. As the queen's transformation continued, Julian felt his own changes accelerating, his human adaptability and Kylaxian crystalline nature finding a unique balance. He had come to their world as a diplomat and become a catalyst for revolution, but not the kind anyone had expected. In the ancient chambers beneath the spiral palace, tradition wasn't just breaking, it was evolving, flowing into something new and wonderful. The next chapter in Kylaxian history was beginning, written not in perfect crystal, but in the flowing scripts of change itself. 1 month after the events in the ancient chambers, the spiral palace had transformed as dramatically as its inhabitants. Crystal walls that once stood rigid now flowed like liquid glass, reflecting the evolution of the Kylaxian people themselves. Julian Nash stood at a window in the diplomatic wing, his hybrid form casting prismatic patterns across the floor as he observed the city below. Still admiring your handiwork, Ambassador? Naira's voice carried new harmonics these days, her fluid crystal form having found an elegant balance between structure and change. Our handiwork, Julian corrected, turning to face her. His own transformation had stabilized into something unique, neither fully human nor purely Kylaxian, but a bridge between worlds. How are the integration programs proceeding? Better than expected, she replied, her form shifting to display data patterns within her crystalline structure. 80% of the population has chosen to undergo the evolutionary process. Even some of our most conservative citizens are beginning to see the benefits of adaptive crystallization. Julian smiled, remembering the chaos of those first few weeks after Queen Lyssandra's transformation. The news had spread through the Empire's crystalline networks like wildfire, causing initial panic followed by fascination as people witnessed their rulers embracing change. And the Queen? He asked, though the answer was evident in the palace's new architecture. Thriving, Theron answered, entering the chamber. The former rebel leader now served as first sentinel, his fluid crystal form a testament to the new era. She's currently hosting a delegation from the Galactic Council. They're quite interested in our cultural revolution, as they're calling it. Julian laughed. I imagine my own transformation was a point of discussion. Actually, a familiar resonant voice joined them, you've become something of a legend in diplomatic circles. Queen Lysandra glided into the room, her form now a masterpiece of fluid crystal artistry. Gone was the rigid perfection of the past, replaced by dynamic beauty that shifted with her emotions and thoughts. The human who turned captivity into catalyst, she continued, amusement rippling through her form. Though I must admit, that wasn't quite what I had in mind when I initiated your transformation. The best changes rarely are what we expect, Julian replied diplomatically. How did the council respond to your proposal? Lysandra's form brightened. They've approved the establishment of the evolutionary exchange program. Other species interested in exploring controlled crystalline adaptation will be welcome to study with us. Under much better circumstances than your experience, of course. Voluntary participation being the key difference, Julian noted dryly, though without rancor. His ordeal had led to positive change for an entire civilization, and himself. A soft chime resonated through the chamber, and a young Kylaxian appeared, their forms still shifting between states as they learned to control their new abilities. Apologies for the interruption, but the Earth delegation has arrived. Julian straightened. This would be his first meeting with representatives from his homeworld since his transformation. Are they ready for this? Are any of us truly ready for change? Lysandra countered. You taught us that the question isn't about readiness, but willingness. Together, they made their way to the grand reception hall, which now resembled a flowing river of crystal caught in mid-motion. The Earth delegation's expressions of wonder were visible even through their environmental suits, the Kylaxian atmosphere still being toxic to unmodified humans. Ambassador Nash, the Earth representative, stepped forward, clearly struggling to reconcile the transformed being before her with the human diplomat she'd known. You're looking, well. Change suits me, Julian replied with a smile that sent prismatic lights dancing across the walls. Though I imagine my new appearance will take some getting used to. Your report on the Kylaxian transformation has caused quite a stir back home, she continued. Some are calling it the next step in human evolution. Not evolution, Julian corrected gently. Adaptation. Choice. The ability to change without losing who we are. He gestured to the Kylaxians around him. Their civilization chose perfect crystallization out of fear. They chose fluid adaptation out of wisdom. Humanity's strength has always been in choosing its own path. The Earth representative nodded slowly. And what path would you recommend for Earth's relationship with the transformed Kylaxian Empire? Julian exchanged glances with Lysandra, their forms creating harmonious patterns where their energies intersected. I recommend we do what humans have always done best, learn, adapt, and grow together. Not by force, not by fear, but by choice. A new age of cooperation, Lysandra added, her form rippling with possibility. Built on understanding that strength lies not in unchanging perfection, but in the courage to evolve. As negotiations began between Earth and the transformed Kylaxian Empire, Julian reflected on his journey. He had arrived as a diplomat and become a catalyst, a bridge between worlds, a living example that change, even forced change, could lead to beautiful possibilities if one was brave enough to shape it. The ancient chambers far below still held their secrets, but their message was now written across an entire civilization. True harmony wasn't found in rigid perfection, but in the endless dance between stability and change, tradition and progress, crystal and flow. Outside the spiral palace, the three moons of Kylaxia cast their light over a changed empire. The crystalline spires no longer reached for the stars in rigid ambition but swayed with new life and possibility. And in their fluid crystal depths, two civilizations began the delicate process of learning from each other, growing together toward a future neither could have imagined alone. Julian Nash, once a reluctant offering to tradition, had become something else entirely, a symbol of transformation, a bridge between worlds, and living proof that the greatest changes often come not from fighting destiny, but from learning to flow with it, shape it, and make it your own.